the worst kind of silence isn't the one that follows a bomb blast. It's the one that falls over a first-grade classroom when a child stops breathing. Reva Cho knew both kinds. She knew the deafening nothing that follows a pressure wave, the way your ears just quit, the way the world becomes a silent film of smoke and falling concrete and mouths screaming things you can't hear. She had lived inside that silence more times than she could count, in places that didn't appear on the maps her mother kept pinned above the kitchen table in Fresno. She also knew the silence of 26 children who had just watched their teacher collapse. Reva didn't prefer either one, but she was better equipped to handle them than anyone at Sycamore Ridge Elementary in Clarksburg. Oregon had any reason to suspect. To the parents who dropped their kids off every morning, she was the new teaching assistant in room 14. Quiet, polite, the kind of woman you forgot about the moment you looked away. She was 31 years old and wore her black hair in a sensible ponytail. Her clothes always one size too large, cardigans and flat-soled shoes, the universal costume of a woman who had decided to stop being noticed. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. She made coffee in the teacher's lounge and always left the last cup for whoever needed it most. She said things like, "Of course, and no trouble at all, and I'll take care of it," in a voice so soft it barely disturbed the air. The lead teacher of room 14 was a man named Douglas Prewitt, 48 years old, 22 years in the district, and built like a man who had never once been wrong about anything. He had a tendency to stand in doorways so that people had to squeeze past him, which Reva suspected was not accidental. On her first day, he had looked her up and down with the particular brand of dismissal that men like him had perfected over a lifetime of unchecked authority, and said, "I hope you're better with a mop than the last one." "We had an incident with the hamster," Reva had said. "Of course, Mr. Prewitt." She had spent 11 years as a field surgeon and intelligence assets with a special activities center unit that officially didn't exist. She had removed shrapnel from a CIA officer's thigh in the backseat of a stolen taxi in Tbilisi. She had performed a cricothyrotomy on a Marine in a pitch-black basement in Mosul, using a penknife and a section of ballpoint pen casing. She had been awarded the Distinguished Intelligence Medal and a commendation from a 4-star general, whose name she was still not permitted to say aloud, for actions that would remain classified for the next 50 years. She was, according to the Clarksburg Unified School District, a level I paraprofessional earning $14.70 an hour. Cho. Prewitt appeared in the doorway of the supply closet on a gray Tuesday morning in November, blocking most of the light. "I need the construction papers sorted by color before the kids come in. Last time you mixed the burgundy in with the red and it caused a whole thing with Jalen." "I'll take care of it," Reva said. He lingered, in the way that Douglas Prewitt always lingered, waiting to see if she would say something he could correct. When she didn't, he made a small sound of satisfaction and left. The woman who ran the front office was named Charlene Dupree, and she was the closest thing Reva had to an ally in the building. Charlene was 62, had worked at Sycamore Ridge since before some of the current parents were born, and could detect bullying in any form with the accuracy of a tuning fork. "He treats everyone like that," Charlene had told Reva in her first week, handing her a cup of coffee. "Don't let it get to you." "It doesn't," Reva said, and that was true. Douglas Prewitt's particular flavor of condescension was nothing compared to the SVR officer who had once spent 4 hours explaining to Reva, in very patient Russian, exactly what was going to happen to her when his associate came back with the bolt cutters. Prewitt was a background noise, a mild annoyance. She had calibrated herself for far worse. She was supposed to be retired. Quietly, administratively, officially retired. Her file at Langley flagged with the 2 words that meant they were done with you, and you were done with them. Medical separation. A sniper's round had clipped her right shoulder 18 months ago in a suburb of Ankara, and while the shoulder had healed mostly fine, the agency's psychologists had written things in their reports that Reva was not permitted to read, but whose conclusion she already knew. She had spent too long in the field. She was what they called risk-saturated. She needed, in the clinical language of the debrief, to experience a sustained period of low-threat civilian reintegration. She had chosen elementary school because she genuinely liked children. They had no agenda. They didn't surveil you. They said exactly what they were thinking, which, after 11 years of decoding what everyone around her was not saying, was the most refreshing thing in the world. She also chose it because Douglas Prewitt didn't have a file at any intelligence agency on Earth, and that felt like a luxury. The morning of November 14th started like every other Tuesday. Reva arrived at 6:50, sorted the construction paper, set up the reading stations, and sharpened 26 pencils to a uniform point because Mr. Prewitt believed that dull pencils were a character flaw. The kids arrived at 8:15 in their puffy coats and their mismatched backpacks, trailing behind them the smell of cold air and syrup. She helped 3 of them with their zipper pulls. She found Jalen's lost water bottle under his cubby. She tied a shoe. Prewitt took attendance and launched into a lesson on 2-digit subtraction, with the particular energy of a man who had given this exact lesson so many times that it had calcified into a kind of performance. Reva sat at the back table, helping a girl named Ruthie with her reading, keeping half her attention on the room the way she always kept half her attention on every room, cataloging exits and occupants, fence, and the precise location of anything that could serve a purpose other than its intended one. That was not anxiety. That was just Reva. She noticed Prewitt wince at 11:15. She noticed it the way she noticed everything, without appearing to notice anything. He touched the left side of his chest with 2 fingers, a small private gesture, and then immediately resumed, explaining borrowing and regrouping as if nothing had happened. Reva set Ruthie up with a new passage and watched him. At 11:23, Douglas Prewitt stopped mid-sentence. He stood at the whiteboard with the marker still in his hand, and his face did something Reva recognized immediately and viscerally. The color left it. Not gradually, the way faces pale from embarrassment or cold, but all at once, like a light switching off. His left arm dropped to his side, his mouth opened and closed. 26 first graders watched their teacher fold sideways and hit the floor. The silence lasted exactly 1.5 seconds. Then a child named Marcus started crying, and the rest of the room followed in a cascade of panic. Reva was already moving before Prewitt hit the ground. She crossed the room in 4 steps and was on her knees beside him, before any of the children nearest to him had even fully registered what they'd seen. She put 2 fingers to his carotid, counted, assessed. His pulse was there but thin and stuttering, a bad rhythm, the electrical system misfiring. His skin was diaphoretic, gray. He was conscious but only barely, his eyes not focusing on anything. "STEMI," Reva said to herself, quietly, in the voice she used when she was working. Calm, flat. A clinician's voice with all the civilian softness wrung out of it. She turned to the room. 26 children, ages 6 and 7, were staring at her with various degrees of terror. Some were crying. Some had pushed back from their desks. Jalen was standing on his chair for reasons that Reva did not have time to investigate. "Everyone look at me," Reva said. Her voice was not loud, but it had a quality that made people look. It always had. "Mr. Prewitt is not feeling well. We are going to help him. I need everyone to move to the reading rug and sit in a circle right now." Like a fire drill, fast and quiet. The children moved. That was the thing about that voice. It left no space for the question of whether you were going to listen to it. Reva pulled her phone from her cardigan pocket and called the front office. "Charlene. Room 14. Cardiac event. Probable MI. I need you to call 911 right now. Tell them 48-year-old male. Suspected STEMI. Onset approximately 60 seconds ago. Have someone meet the paramedics at the front entrance. Don't put me on hold." There was a half-second pause that Reva suspected was Charlene recalibrating her entire understanding of who she had been making coffee with for the past 3 months. "On it," Charlene said. Reva put the phone down and turned back to Prewitt. She had already located the automated external defibrillator on the wall beside the fire extinguisher, noted its position and the approximate pull force required to open the cabinet. She had located it on her first day. She located them everywhere she went, the way she located emergency exits and load-bearing walls and the distance from her seat to anyone whose hands were not visible. Prewitt's breathing was irregular now. His eyes were closing. Mr. Prewitt! Reva put a hand firmly on his shoulder. Douglas, stay with me. He looked at her, and she could see the fear in his face, the same naked animal fear she had seen on the faces of men who were much harder than Douglas Prewitt, men who had spent their whole lives being certain they were invincible, confronted suddenly with the proof that they were not. She found it remarkable how the same thing could make every kind of person exactly the same. He started. You're having a cardiac event, she said. Help is coming. I need you to stay still and stay with me. She had already loosened his collar and his belt. She was monitoring his breathing and pulse simultaneously, her hands doing what her hands knew how to do, which was keep someone alive until better resources arrived. She retrieved the AED from the wall cabinet and had it open and ready in 8 seconds. Prewitt's pulse dropped. The arrhythmia worsened. She could feel it in the thread of his carotid, the irregular skipping that meant the signal was getting lost somewhere between his heart's intention and its execution. She used the AED. She used it correctly and efficiently, and with the practiced speed of someone who had performed advanced cardiac care in conditions that made a first-grade classroom look like a surgical suite. When the paramedics arrived 4 minutes and 30 seconds later, they found Prewitt conscious, stabilized, with a pulse that was weak but consistent, and an oxygen mask scribe that one of the paramedics with Chamis greeted in the hospital break room as having been applied with a precision that was, quote, extremely atypical for a school aide. Reva stepped back when the EMTs came through the door. She slipped into the hallway. She straightened her cardigan. Charlene was standing in the hallway with a hand over her heart, staring at her. Reva, Charlene said. He's stable, Reva said. They'll take him now. Can you call for a substitute? The kids are on the reading rug. Jalen is still on a chair. I don't know what that's about. Charlene didn't move. She was still staring. Charlene. Where did you, Charlene, started and then stopped and then said, who are you? I'm the para for room 14, Reva said. I'll go sit with the kids until the sub arrives. She went back inside room 14, sat down on the reading rug in the circle of 26 first graders, and said, Mr. Prewitt is going to go see some doctors. He's going to be okay. Who wants to read a story while we wait? Ruthie raised her hand immediately. It should have ended there. Reva had expected it to end there, the kind of small, extraordinary event that gets absorbed into a school year the way all small, extraordinary events do, talked about for a few weeks and then filed away. She would have preferred that. She had spent 3 years building a life that was, by careful and deliberate design, eventless. Eventless was the goal. Eventless was the entire point. The universe, she had come to understand, found this deeply funny. The morning after the incident, the principal called her into his office. His name was Albert Gaines, a mild and somewhat nervous man who had been a school administrator for 16 years and had, in that time, developed a deep institutional allergy to anything unusual. He looked at Reva across his desk with the expression of a man holding a piece of paper that said something he did not know how to process. The paramedics filed an incident report, he said. Standard procedure, Reva said. They described your response as, quote, highly trained clinical interventions consistent with advanced emergency medicine. He set the paper down. Miss Cho, our records show that your only listed qualification is an associate's degree in education. I've taken some first aid courses, Reva said. Gaines looked at her for a long moment. Reva, did you save Douglas Prewitt's life yesterday? The AED and the paramedics saved his life. I just kept him stable until they arrived. Gaines pressed his fingers together. I think we both know that's not the whole story. Reva didn't say anything. I'm not asking you to explain yourself, Gaines said. I just want you to know that what you did yesterday was, he paused, searching for the right word, not what we expected. I know, Reva said. I'm sorry if that was disruptive. She went back to room 14 and helped the substitute set up the morning stations and didn't think about it again, or tried not to, which was not exactly the same thing. Douglas Prewitt came back to school 11 days later. He walked into room 14 on a Monday morning with a slightly looser collar and a look on his face that Reva had never seen there before. Uncertainty. He stood in the doorway, and looked at the room, and then looked at Reva at the back of the ball stool and stood there for a long moment saying nothing. "Good morning, Mr. Prewitt," Reva said. "Coffee's in the lounge. I saved you the last cup." Prewitt opened his mouth and closed it. He looked at his shoes. "He looked Cho," he said. "Yes? He stopped. Started again. I wanted to say. Another stop. This was, Reva understood, a man who had very little practice saying the thing he was currently trying to say. "The doctors told me what you did. They said that if there had been a delay of even another 2 minutes," he pressed his lips together. "They said I would have died." "You didn't," Reva said simply. Prewitt looked at her with an expression she didn't know how to read at first, and then she did. It was the expression of a man who had spent 48 years being certain of the relative value of the people around him, and had just discovered that his math was catastrophically wrong. He started. "It's fine," Reva said. "It's not," he said, and his voice came out quieter than she'd ever heard it. "I've been a real ass to you." She didn't disagree. The 3 days that followed were quiet in the way that the eye of a storm is quiet. Deceptively, temporarily, in a way that had weight to it. Reva had been waiting for the other shoe since the morning of the 14th. She knew how these things worked. You did something that couldn't be explained by your cover story, and then you waited for someone to pull the thread. The thread arrived on a Thursday, in the form of 4 people she hadn't seen in 2 years. She was locking up room 14 at 4:30 in the afternoon, the school long emptied of children, when she heard footsteps in the hallway that were wrong. Not wrong like a threat, necessarily, but wrong like a frequency she recognized. The cadence of people who moved with professional deliberateness, who set their feet with the automatic caution of people trained to make less noise than they actually made. She set down the staple gun she'd been using to reset the reading wall and waited. They came around the corner, 4 people in civilian clothes so carefully chosen to look unremarkable that they looked, to Reva's eye, immediately remarkable. A tall woman in a gray peacoat, a shorter man with a logistics company lanyard hanging from his jacket pocket that was definitely not from a logistics company. 2 others behind them, all of them carrying the particular stillness of people who spent most of their lives doing things requiredness. The tall woman stopped when she saw Reva. The line of her face, already controlled, went a degree more controlled. The way it did when she was holding something back. "Margot," Reva said. Margot Strand had been her operations chief for the last 6 years of Reva's career. She was 44 years old, ran 5 miles every morning before sunrise, and had a mind that could triangulate intentions, assets, and liabilities with the speed of a targeting computer. She was also one of 3 people on Earth whose opinion Reva genuinely valued. "You're harder to find than you used to be," Margot said. "That's the idea," Reva said. "You want to come in? There's a frog habitat in the corner that Jalen is very proud of." Margot glanced at the terrarium, at the cheerful paper sunflowers, at the 26 small chairs pushed neatly in around 26 small desks. Something moved across her face, too fast to name. "I'll stand," she said. The man with the lanyard, whose name was Prescott and who had been the unit's intelligence coordinator, produced a sealed folder from inside his jacket and set it on the nearest desk. Reva didn't touch it yet. "Talk," she said. Margot talked. The summary took 6 minutes. It contained a missing physicist named Dr. Terrence Riss, who had been 3 days away from delivering classified research on rare earth electromagnetic shielding technology to a Senate subcommittee when he vanished from his home in Bend, Oregon. It contained a private acquisition firm called Ardmore Strategic Group, which officially managed pension funds and infrastructure bonds, and unofficially maintained a network of former intelligence contracts, whose informally deemed had never been formally investigated, because the people who would have investigated them kept being reassigned. It contained the information that Ardmore had people in Clarksburg. More specifically, it contained the information that 2 of Ardmore's contractors had spent the past 72 hours in a rented house 4 miles from Sycamore Ridge Elementary, and that the reason they were in Clarksburg had everything to do with Dr. Reese's daughter, who was 6 years old and in room 14, and whose name was Winnie. Reva was quiet for a moment. "They're going to use her," she said. "It wasn't a question." Leverage, Margot confirmed. Rise won't talk. He's been moved twice already. We don't know where he is now. Ardmore is running out of soft approaches. She paused. They know about what happened with Prewitt. It got into the local paper. Small item, but they were watching for anything unusual in her proximity. They think I'm her handler, Reva said. They think you're something, Margot said. Which means they're going to move tonight, before they can find out what. Reva looked at Winnie Reese's cubby, which had a drawing of a horse taped to the front of it, and a small purple backpack hanging from the hook, which Winnie had forgotten, because Winnie forgot her backpack approximately every third day, and Reva had gotten used to texting her mother as a matter of course. What do you need from me? Reva said. We need to move her tonight, quietly, before Ardmore does. We have a safe transport to Portland, and from there her mother is already in protective custody. But we need someone she trusts to make the transfer. Margot's eyes held hers. We need someone who can manage any friction that arises during extraction. How many contractors are we talking about? Our last count was 3. Possibly 4. We don't believe they're expecting resistance. They wouldn't, Reva said, because I work at an elementary school and I was supposed to be invisible. Prescott said from the back. Reva looked at the purple backpack on the hook. She thought about Eventless. She thought about her carefully chosen cardigan and her flat shoes and the way she had spent 3 years reducing herself to a background color, a piece of the scenery, a woman you forgot the moment you looked away. She picked up Winnie's backpack. Give me until 6, she said. I need to make a phone call and I need a different set of clothes. Margot handed her a phone. Then she unzipped her peacoat and removed the compact holster, clipped to her side, and held it out. Reva looked at it for a moment. I'm going to be in a neighborhood with a 6-year-old, Reva said. I'd rather not. Friction, Margot said simply. Reva took the holster. She made the phone call to Winnie's mother first, short and careful, and in a voice that was not her Room 14 voice, but the other one, the flat and certain voice that told people exactly what was happening, without leaving room for the wrong questions. Winnie's mother, whose name was Dr. Sasha Reese, and who had clearly been briefed enough to know what kind of call she was receiving, listened without interrupting, asked 2 precise questions, and said, Please bring her home. I will, Reva said. She changed in the supply closet, swapping the cardigan for a dark zip collar pullover from the bag Prescott had brought. She kept the flat shoes. She clipped the holster at the small of her back and pulled the pullover over it. Then she walked out into the parking lot in the gray November dark and got into the car with Margot and Prescott and drove to the address. Margot had identified as Winnie's current location, her grandmother's house on the east side of Clarksburg, where Winnie was staying while her mother was in protective custody. The grandmother's name was Nell. She was 71 years old, and when she opened the door and found Reva on her porch at 6:15 in the evening, her expression went through 3 distinct phases: recognition, confusion, and the specific sharpening of a woman who had lived long enough to know when something was not a social call. Miss Cho, Nell said, Mrs. Quiet, Mrs. Reese, I need to speak with you about Winnie. Can I come in? Nell let her in. Winnie was on the living room floor with a coloring book, wearing footed pajamas printed with small dogs. She looked up when Reva came in and said, I left my backpack, with the combination of guilt and relief that children deploy when the thing they forgot has been retrieved by someone who isn't angry about it. You did, Reva said, setting the backpack down beside her. She sat on the floor next to Winnie, a move that brought her below the window line, which was not incidental. Winnie, I need you to do something for me, okay? It's going to feel a little bit like an adventure, but it's real, and I need you to listen to exactly what I say. Winnie looked at her with the pure, direct attentions that 6-year-olds deployed when they sensed that an adult was speaking to them as something other than a child. Okay, Winnie said. Reva got Nell into the back of the kitchen, below the window line, and explained what was necessary in as few words as possible. Nell, to her considerable credit, absorbed the information with the composure of a woman who had lived through things that had given her a reference point for real emergencies. How long? Nell asked. 30 minutes to Portland. She'll be with her mother tonight. Nell pressed her lips together and nodded once, and then straightened her spine in a way that reminded Reva, sharply and unexpectedly, of the way certain people straightened up just before the hard part. The hard part arrived at 6:41. Reva was in the process of getting Winnie's coat on, which required negotiation because Winnie had opinions about buttons, when Prescott's voice came through the earpiece Margot's had given her. "Vehicle on the block, 2 occupants. Circling, copy," Reva said very quietly, at an angle away from Winnie. "What?" Winnie said. "Nothing. Bug, do the buttons yourself. You're faster than me." She moved to the front window, 3 inches from the frame, and looked out without presenting a silhouette. The car was a dark gray sedan, moving slowly in the way that cars moved slowly when they were not going anywhere but needed to appear to be. 2 men in the front. She clocked the set of their shoulders, the angle of their attention. Professionals, she confirmed, but running quietly, not expecting this to be difficult. They were wrong. "Margot," she said into the earpiece, "I need a route out the back. Back fence opens to the alley. Prescott is in the alley now with the vehicle. Copy. Nell." She turned to the grandmother. "Take Winnie through the kitchen and to the back door. Walk normally. Don't hurry. I'll be right behind you." "Where are you going?" Winnie said, appearing suddenly with all her buttons correctly done, which was frankly impressive. "I'm going to say goodbye to someone," Reva said. "I'll be 2 steps behind you the whole time. You won't even know I'm gone." She waited until Nell had taken Winnie's hand and started for the kitchen. Then she went to the front door. She opened it before they knocked. The 2 men on the porch were large, well-constructed in the way that money and training produced, and in the half-second it took them to recalibrate to the door opening before they'd touched it, Reva had already assessed which of them was the lead and which was the follow, and what each of them was reaching for and where. "Can I help you?" "Can I help you?" she said, in her room 14 voice, soft and slightly helpless. The lead man, who was wearing a jacket with a small embroidered logo that Reva recognized as Ardmore's Civilian Company, said, "We're looking for." Reva moved. She did not give a speech. She did not threaten. She simply used the doorframe as a fulcrum, and the lead man's own momentum, and the 3 specific techniques that an instructor at the farm had spent 6 weeks drilling into her until they were as automatic as breathing. And in approximately 4 seconds, there were 2 large men on the porch floor, with their hands secured behind them with the zip ties that Margot's had included in the bag with the dark pullover, because Margot thought of everything. Reva stepped over them, pulled the door closed behind her, and walked to the back of the house. She came through the kitchen and out the back door and found Winnie standing in the alley next to Prescott's SUV, looking at Prescott with the evaluative suspicion that first graders reserved for unknown adults. "Is that a real lanyard?" Winnie asked him. "No," Prescott said. "I knew it," Winnie said. Reva put Winnie in the back seat and buckled the seatbelt herself and then got in beside her. "Are we going somewhere fun?" Winnie said. "We're going to see your mom," Reva said. Winnie went very still. Then she said, in a voice so small it barely filled the space between them, "My mom is okay? Your mom is okay," Reva said. "She's waiting for you." Winnie looked at her for a moment with those direct, clear eyes that missed nothing, and then she leaned over and put her head against Reva's arm and didn't say anything else. The drive to Portland took 28 minutes. Margot's was on a call for most of it, quiet and clipped, coordinating things that Reva did not ask about. Prescott drove. Nobody spoke much. When they pulled into the parking structure where the handoff was arranged, Dr. Sasha Race was already there, standing next to a government vehicle with 2 agents Reva didn't recognize. She was still wearing clothes that suggested she had not been home in days. When the SUV's door opened and Winnie climbed out, Dr. Reese made a sound that Reva didn't try to describe because there was no good description for it. Winnie ran to her mother. Reva stood beside the car and watched them, and felt the familiar, complicated thing she always felt at the end of the hard part, the clean absence of fear, the strange and persistent knowledge that she was good at this in a way she had never entirely asked to be. Margot came to stand beside. "Come back," Margot said. "I'm not coming back," Reva said. "Reva." "Margot." She said it quietly, not unkindly. "I like my job. I like the reading rug and the frog habitat, and I like that the hardest decision I make most days is whether burgundy and red go in the same pile. She paused. I'm good at that job, too. Margot looked at her for a long moment. You saved Prewitt, she said, and you just neutralized 2 Ardmore contractors in under 5 seconds with a Ziploc bag and whatever you were doing with your hands. A door frame, Reva said, and I used the zip ties you packed. I want credit for the resource management. Margot's almost smiled. It was a very small and careful almost smile, but it was there. She reached into her peacoat pocket and took out a small card and held it out. It was unprinted, just a number, handwritten. If you change your mind, she said. I won't, if something changes. Reva took the card and put it in the pocket of her dark pullover. She didn't say anything else. She got a ride back to Clarksburg from one of the Portland-based agents, who asked her exactly 0 questions and dropped her 2 blocks from the school. She walked to her car in the empty parking lot. The November dark had fully arrived by then, the streetlights making small yellow circles on the wet asphalt. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment without starting the car. In the back seat was a reusable grocery bag with Ruthie's reading assessment forms, which Reva had been meaning to take home and go over. She reached back and set it on the passenger seat. She pulled off the dark pullover and folded it and put it on the floor. Underneath it, she was still wearing her work shirt. She straightened the collar. She started the car and drove home. The next morning, she arrived at 6:50. She made the coffee. She set out the reading stations. She sharpened 26 pencils to a uniform and unjudgmental point. Prewitt arrived at 7:15 with a looser collar and what appeared to be a genuine good morning. He held the door for her. He did not say anything about her being slow or incompetent or better suited to a different job. He said, I left you the last cup, and pointed at the lounge. Charlene, passing in the hallway, caught Reva's eye and raised both her eyebrows very slowly, in the manner of a woman who had a great many questions, and the wisdom to know this was not the moment for them. Reva smiled at her and went to collect her coffee. The children came at 8:15 in their puffy coats, and Winnie Reese was among them, which Reva had not expected, and which required one single recalibrating breath before she converted it back into her ordinary face. Winnie walked in and went straight to Reva's table as she often did, and sat down and pulled out her book. I went to see my mom, Winnie said, by way of explanation. I know, Reva said. Winnie looked at her, the same clear, direct look. 6 years old, and she already looked at people with the attentiveness of someone who knew the difference between the story you were telling and the one underneath it. You helped, Winnie said. It was not a question. A little, Reva said. Winnie nodded once, satisfied, and opened her book to the correct page, and Reva sat beside her and did the same. Outside the window, the November sky was doing its best impression of something peaceful. The school filled with noise the way schools do. Shoes on linoleum, chair legs scraping, a fire truck somewhere in the distance. 26 small voices talking all at once about nothing important and everything essential. Douglas Prewitt, standing at the whiteboard with his marker uncapped, glanced over his shoulder at the quiet woman at the back table with her flat shoes and her sensible ponytail, leaning over a first grader's reading book, and said nothing, because there was nothing adequate to say. Some things you do not recover from, in the best possible way.